Good morning. Typically don't have an introduction prior to our Sunday school, but typically we don't have a distinguished speaker that comes from us from afar. And today, continuing on with our presentations yesterday with regard to our marriage seminar entitled The DNA of a Sacred Marriage, a Blueprint for Growing Together, Dr. Steve Wages comes our way at our request and at his kind agreement to participate and lead our seminar. And yesterday we had well over 100 people here, probably 130 so if you take care of into account all of the youth and the young people that are involved in participating in our marriage seminar. It was highly effective. Well, we have the opportunity to listen to Dr. Wages two more times today. One is now, just as soon as I shut up, and be able to continue his seminar yesterday, and then he will make a presentation during the sermon slot this morning. Dr. Steve Wages is a professor of family studies, and he's the director also of the Center for Youth and Family, the Center for Youth and Family there at Faulkner. It's the Cloverdale Center in Montgomery, Alabama. Dr. Wages obtained his Master's of Marriage and Family Therapy, a degree from Abilene Christian, 1994, and a doctorate in Family, Child, and Consumer Science from Florida State University. He's certified as a family life educator by the National Council on Family Relations. He and his wife, Wanda, have been married for 46 years. And by the way, I had to prompt him the other day to get him to verify that, but he pulled out his calculator, and yes, it's 46 years. Blessed with 2 children and 4 grandchildren. Dr. Wages, we look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mac. Hey, we worked hard yesterday, didn't we? I think so. What did we do? We raised the bar, right? We're raising the bar, the level of expectation we have on ourselves as husbands and wives. Yes, I'm raising the bar on Steve. And so we had a wonderful day yesterday, and we will try to finish well today, okay? Hey, thank you. I'm rather proud of myself. Mac said he would pick me up at 8:45. I noticed when he drove up at 8:36, I was there. I was ready. And so, Mac, you're having a good influence on me. I'm going to turn over a new leaf about being on time. Yes, it's been good to get to know Mac, Elisha, and others. Look, hey, we're going to jump back in. And here's what I decided to do. I made an executive decision. We had to pull up short with session 5 yesterday, right? And so I got to looking at session 6, and what I decided to do is I think I would rather finish session 5 and try to make sure we do a good job with it, and then I will try to abbreviate session 6. And we won't have time for all of session 6, but they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And so I'm going to try to paint a picture of the dance that destroys relationships. I'm going to try to paint a picture of that, and I won't have as much time to go through the PowerPoints with you. But I am hoping, and I had dinner with Elisha and Anne Marie yesterday evening, I am hoping that this has been rather intensive, hasn't it? We've been working pretty hard. And so I do believe and hope that Elisha, in the class that you have on marriage, will take at least some of what we've done here and have some deeper conversations with you on these things. Hey, let me do a little bit of a review from session 5 yesterday. We talked a little bit about legitimate needs. I suggest to you that there are 2 kinds of needs. There are legitimate needs and there are illegitimate needs. Legitimate needs, I call them being needs, B-E-I-N-G. They are being needs because God created us, what? As relationship beings, right? It was God that looked down and said it's not good for man to be alone, right? He needs someone, right? And then you have all those one another scriptures and all that encourage one another. He needs encouragement, right? We have legitimate needs in relationships. Affection, we talked about yesterday, what? Is a legitimate need. My wife's need for conversation is legitimate. She likes to talk more than I do. That's rather stereotypical, but her need for conversation, intimate conversation, is a legitimate need. Then there's also illegitimate needs. I call illegitimate needs deficiency needs. They're born out of some deficiency of mine. For example, if I have a low self-esteem, is it legitimate to expect my spouse to give me self-esteem? Not really. Not really. That's not a legitimate need. For example, you are to make me happy. Well, no, that's really illegitimate. It's not for me to make you happy. I'd like to enhance your happiness, but I'm not responsible for your happy. Identity would be a good example of an illegitimate need. I need you to give me a sense of identity. Listen to me. We live in a world of gender confusion these days where people are walking around saying, who am I? Am I male? Am I female? If you go back to the very creation, what did God say? I created you in my what? Image. You know what that says about identity? It says you are an image bearer of God. That is your identity. When you've been clothed with Christ, what is your identity? Your identity is in Christ. It's not for my spouse to give me a sense of identity. I'm an image bearer of God. Wherever you are, you have an identity. So there's legitimate needs and there are illegitimate needs. Can I have a little fun with it? It's like he says, I need sex every day. And I'm like, no. You don't. That's illegitimate. Some days you can chew on the bedpost, right? You know, that's not a legitimate need. All right. So we talked about his needs, her needs. This is Harley's model, and I think it's a good model. But look, the point I'm trying to make here is whatever your needs are, which may very well be different than her needs, all right? Whatever they are, it doesn't have to be Harley's list. What? Remember the exercise we did yesterday? We are, what? Emotionally invested in doing it our way. We are emotionally invested in getting our needs met. So consequently, we said all negative emotions are the result of unfulfilled expectations. So if you take my needs and wants, this is what I expect, and this is my experience, this is what I'm receiving, the difference in those two would be negative emotion, right? All negative emotions are the result of unfulfilled expectations. And so the problem comes in when we become the brokers of our needs. I am a broker. I'm going to negotiate with you trying to get my needs met, right? And it's when I make a bid, so to speak, to get you to meet my need the way I believe it should be met, that we end up with problems. Isn't it true? We try to communicate about this issue, and I register a request for change, but perhaps I say it in a way that comes across as a criticism of you. I use you statements rather than I statements. And so I register a complaint. Maybe I even say it the right way, but you don't have thick skin and you take it as a criticism. Either way, what Gottman found is couples oftentimes, particularly distressed couples, it's perceived as a criticism. And when it comes across as a criticism, guess what? My defenses go up. I begin to defend myself. And it's at this point, I believe, that things get emotional. Is when I get defensive and I, watch this word, I react to you in defensiveness, right? I am reacting now. And the emotions are going up. And guess what? When I get defensive and I react to you, guess what you tend to do to me? You You react to me, right? And the emotions are going up. Matter of fact, could I use this phrase? Not only do we react, we reenact. We reenact. Like, hey, if your emotions went up and your volume went up, guess what I do? I reenact what you just did. My emotions go up, my volume goes up. Maybe I'm not the only one that goes for volume, but hey, I suspect I'm not the only one, right? It's escalating now. And Gottman found then, as this pattern repeats itself over and over, day to day, as we try to deal with the everyday differences and tensions of life, over time, if we are managing conflict, as he found many couples do, it leads to a contempt. Another way to say contempt is, I no longer respect you. You hurt me, I hurt you, you hurt, you see, and over time he found that couples ultimately will withdraw and distance from each other, right? I'm kind of reviewing a little bit here. And so we went to a number of passages to illustrate how we should, watch this, I'm going to use a different word, how we should respond to one another. See, the passages we looked at yesterday, about 8 or so of those, they're really talking about how we respond to one another. That's a very different word than react to one another. Matter of fact, Tommy Nelson uses the phrase, respond as though you're responding to God. So rather than reacting to you, I'm going to respond as though I was responding to God. And it did occur to me that somebody in here might say, yeah, my spouse thinks they're God. I may as well, right? But we won't go there, all right? Reckless words pierce like a sword. That's reacting. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. You know what that is? That's responding. That's discussing things. And so we went on and I showed you the video, this video, and I think it's a powerful video that says, change your words and you'll change your world. When we learn to talk differently, when we learn to respond differently, when we learn to discuss differently, we will protect our relationship, we will enhance our relationship, we will diminish the conflict. And so we went through some basic rules, and we're not going to do them again, but I'm saying you got to have some ground rules. I remember the couple, Wanda and I were mentoring this couple, and actually she was rather physically imposing. He was like a small guy, and she was a larger, and we're like, hey, when it comes to talking about conflict, how do you guys, and tell us how you're going to do it. She says, well, in my family, we yelled. He says, well, in my family, we didn't yell. I'm like, well, okay, what about the two of you? What are you going to do? What's going to be the ground rules? What's going to be the rule for you talking about conflict? She said, again, in my family, we yelled. He said again, well, in my family, we didn't yell. I'm like, yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is, what are the two of you going to do in your relationship? She said it again, third time. In my family, we yelled. He finally said, well, I guess you'll yell and I won't. I'm like, I can see where that's going, right? Huh? You got to have some ground rules. So we went through some ground rules yesterday, didn't we? And I encouraged you to go home and put an S by things that are your strength and put a G by things that are your growth areas. And then we did the anatomy of an argument where, hey, Wanda and I kind of get into these things sometimes where she's trying to share an emotion and Steve's really inclined to fix it, right, and tell her what to do. And I don't think I'm the only one that very quickly moves to, hey, let me tell you what to do. Let me tell you what you ought to do. Let me give you my opinion. Let me tell you what I want. Let me tell you a course of action. We move very quickly to the idea of, hey, let me fix that for you. Do you remember when you were a teenager and you would share a feeling, emotion, or something, a problem with your parents, and they would start telling you what to do? And there's a lot of teenagers don't really appreciate that. Like, hey, Mom, Dad, I really don't want you to tell me what to do. I'd really like you to understand my feelings. right? And so we'll get back to that. Or when we men don't know exactly what to do with his or her feelings and emotions and such, we will tend to question the logic of those emotions. Hey, if you didn't think that way, you wouldn't feel like that. Glad I could help you. You know, and so we feel pretty inadequate. So I gave you two models. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants their feelings to be validated. And everybody wants their problem solved. And I told you what I've learned to do with Wanda is I really need to attend to number one and number two before dealing with what are we going to do. I do believe we're too hard on men sometimes about solving things. I do think it's a loving thing to do if I can help you find some solutions. But I've learned it doesn't work very well to neglect number one and two. And so what I've learned to do with Wanda is like, tell me your story. Tell me what's going on. And just let her share what the story is. All her thinking and such, what's going on. Tell me how you're feeling. And then validate her feelings. Yeah, that sounds frustrating to me. I could see why you're upset over that. And then I have learned to kind of leave number three up to her. It's like, Wanda, would you like some ideas? Would you like some suggestions? And sometimes she'll say, yeah, what do you think? What's your idea? And sometimes she'll say, no, I'm not really looking for you to solve this. Tell me what to do. And that's okay. And as a matter of fact, that's actually a relief. I don't have to come up with a solution. And then we talked about 4 C's of conflict resolution. Like you really only have 4 choices, and when you're at odds with each other, and we're especially talking about certainly major issues and such, but maybe minor ones too. But you can coexist, which means celebrate your differences. You can capitulate, like give in, let's do it your way. You can compromise, which means we both give up some of our position, or you can look for the deeper issue, oftentimes a character or heart issue that's beneath the problem. You with me? It occurred to me, we used a simple illustration of buying peaches yesterday to illustrate this, but hey, at world events, you look at I'm not a great historian, but if you look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's been going on, I think, for many, many years from what I understand, and they're fighting over this land, right? And so Israel wants to draw the boundary here, and Palestinians want to draw the boundary there. If you really think about a major internet, why has diplomacy never worked? Well, for one thing, we could coexist. Let's draw the line here, and you stay on that side, and we'll stay on this side. We won't shoot at each other, and we'll be okay. Or one could capitulate. So you want the boundary to be drawn here. Let's draw the boundary where you want it. We'll capitulate. You stay on that side. We'll stay on that side. We won't shoot at each other. We won't kill each other, and we'll be okay. Or we could compromise. You want the boundary there, we want the boundary here. Why don't we draw it down the middle? You stay on that side, we stay on this side, and we won't kill each other. And yet all the diplomacy they try, just invariably, sooner or later, somebody lobs it, right? And here we go again. Why is it? It's number 4. It's like we hate each other. It's a hard issue. There's a much deeper issue that can't be fixed on paper. Right? And that's true whether we're talking world events or we're talking that can of peaches you're buying this next week. So, this is where we were. Why do we so easily jump into power struggles? So when people suggest that our way isn't right or better, we fear that they will take us someplace we don't want to go. Isn't that true? We don't like people imposing behavior on us, including our spouse. You have only 2 options. I love this. You either both win or you both lose. You either both win or you both lose. See, when you're on the same team, you understand it. It's a rather simple concept. When you're on the same team, you either win together or you lose together. And guess what? As a married couple, we are a team. And when it comes to conflict, we either resolve our differences, our conflicts in a way where we win together, or guess what? We lose together. But if there's a win-lose, guess what? You both lose. Are you with me? And so I like this adopt a no-losers policy. Members of a team win together or lose together. Yeah, you can choose whether that team is going to succeed or fail. You decide whether it brings you pain or delight. It's your choice. What will you choose to do? Will you choose to win together, or will you choose to lose together? And so he refers to this couple who said they agreed that from that point on it would never be acceptable for either of them to walk away from any interaction feeling as if they had lost. Now, I'm telling you, that's hard to do, but watch this. Each spouse had to feel good about what happened. You don't have to worry that the other person will accept a solution that makes him or her feel bad. That was the new goal. Notice the language, that's a goal. You think they're perfect in it? I don't think so. In general, I prefer to hold on. I'll save that one a moment. Yeah, we're not going to be perfect in it. Does it mean that we will no longer be adversarial? No, you'll still have some of those adversarial moments. You won't be perfect in it. But if you will establish a new goal, that any conflict we have, that we're going to create a win-win. That's the goal. We're not going to walk away and one of us think that, wow, we just lost out on that deal. Because when you lose, it's a withdrawal from what? What? The love bank. It's a withdrawal. And so you're not going to be perfect in it, but I suggest this to you. If you will make a new goal. See, notice the new goal. The goal is no longer having my way. The goal is no longer getting my way. The goal is now creating a win-win. I may not get all of what I desire, but the goal here for us as a couple is to create a win-win. And so I may need to capitulate to create a win-win. I may need to compromise to create a win-win, or right? And so that's the new goal. You are redefining what winning is. It's no longer, I got my way. I got exactly what I wanted. The goal is we as a couple created a win-win over this issue. So we're really, what I'm really trying to say to you, it comes to how do you talk about it? How do you discuss it? Do you react? Do you respond, discuss, talk through, create a win-win? In general, I prefer to hold off on decisions until the other person and I can arrive at a place of unity. But if a decision must be made, I try to determine who appears to be the most qualified to make it, based on experience or training or something else, and let that person decide. I do think it's true in couple relationships that we have different gifts and such. My wife has some insights and about things that Steve doesn't have. She has some life experiences that I don't have that maybe give her a lens to view some things, see some things that I might be missing. And so you always value your spouse's voice, opinion, and experience. You with me? Always. And so he says, hey, I look at who is based. How about this one? How about I'll give you a little different way to think about this. He says, based on experience or training or something else. Could I tell you about something else? What if you let the Holy Spirit decide? Especially when it comes to the big decisions of life. You're trying to decide whether to take this job or that job. You're trying to decide whether to move to this city or that city. You're trying to decide whether to take this promotion or not take this promotion. Those are big decisions. Do you have any idea how God would lead you in those things? I don't have time today, but there's a series we could do that's called Listening to God. How do you discern whether God's in this decision or God's in this decision? You know what most of us do? We put a line down a piece of paper and we look rewards and cost of each one and we figure out which one would be most profitable, and that's what we would do. I suggest to you one simple principle. God will oftentimes call you to do that which conflicts with human reasoning, with what's most profitable. But my main point, I digress. My main point at the moment is this. Is God a God of confusion? Is God of division? So when it comes to the big issues of life, if we learn how to discern God's leading in our lives, there's biblical principles for that. Do you suppose the Holy Spirit, I'm talking about Romans chapter 8, where it clearly talks about being led by the Spirit. It talks about the natural man, and then it talks about the spiritual man. Do you think a spiritual man makes decisions in a different way than the natural man? Absolutely. And so Romans 8 is talking about being Spirit-led. Do you believe that if my wife and I study and discern principles of being led by the Spirit, Romans chapter 8, that the Spirit's going to lead me one place and lead her somewhere else? I don't think so. God is not the author of division. And when we invest ourselves into learning of how God would lead us to decide and discern on the big issues of life, I believe the Holy Spirit will lead us to unity. And we won't make a decision on this issue until we have prayed about it and talked about it in the right way and come to a place of unity. It would be rare, and I can maybe only think of one occasion in recent memory where Steve made a unilateral decision. This is what we're going to do. Otherwise, I work to get the two of us, and she does too, on the same page before we move forward. You with me? Hey, let's see. A 7-step process to reaching win-win solutions. These are in your PowerPoints. I do hope Elisha will share these things with you where they're available to you. Establish a no-loser policy. Listen to how the other feels. Try to understand the big deal for the other. The emotion, and I'm going to say more about that here in a few moments in the time that we have left. Step 3, ask God for his opinion. That's Romans 8. That's what I was just saying. Being spirit, God says something about the big issues of life, finances and relationships and such. Number 4, brainstorm about a win-win solution. Make sure that this is a green light session, a time when both of you feel safe to share ideas. Select a win-win solution. Implement, this is a basic decision-making model, this part. Select a win-win solution, implement your solution, and then reevaluate your solution. You come back later and say, hey, did that work, or do we need to do something else? That's a basic decision-making model. But I like the idea, hey, invite God into the conversation. Think God would have something to say about the big decisions you make in your life? I heard of the story of a man who made the decision to take his family to the mission field and didn't consult his wife. I'm here to tell you that's not what Scripture teaches, and we'll say more about that during our worship hour. Okay, very quickly. Part of some of our ground rules. We need to eliminate the love busters. Harley has a book called The Love Busters. I'd recommend it to you. There are some things that will cost you dearly when it comes to the love bank. And just like those character deficits we talked about yesterday, it's like you need to get rid of these things because they will be major withdrawals from your love bank. Selfish demands. We mentioned selfishness a good bit yesterday, where we manipulate the other person to get our way. How about this one? Disrespectful judgments, where you try to change your spouse's attitudes and beliefs and behaviors, kind of force them into your way of thinking. Look, you may have a different judgment or opinion, but you don't have to get disrespectful with it, right? Because what did we say yesterday? You always hold them in a place of what? Honor and respect, right? So disrespectful judgment. Number 4, angry outburst. Deliberate attempts by your spouse to hurt you because of anger toward you. They are usually in the form of verbal or physically intimidating reaction. Hey, I hate to confess to you, but I've had moments where That's just wages. That's an angry outburst. My father comes out. My alcoholic father comes out of me. I grew up with that. I mean, that was day to day angry outburst. And I'm ashamed to say that, hey, every now and then that raises its head, and I raise my voice. I said to my wife 2 days ago before coming to this, I was doing this PowerPoint, I guess, and I'm like, hey, Wanda, I know I've had times of angry outbursts, and I want you to know I'm sorry for it. I wish it never happened. Pray it never happens again. It's an ugly scene when you know what I mean by angry outbursts? I suspect most of you do. Where the emotions go up, the volume goes up, and you try, hey, what I said yesterday, if you can't win by reason, you go for volume. That's an ugly scene, and it's a major withdrawal from the love bank, right? You got to get rid of it. It's got to be against the ground rules. We don't do that in our marriage. If I can't talk about it, if I can't respond to you as though I was responding to God, then we need to take a break, right? We need some time apart. Dishonesty. I have a couple Wanda and I are trying to mentor now. She keeps saying to it, he lies. He lies. It's like little dishonesties about habits and thoughts and feelings and activities and all that. A little dishonesty, and that dishonesty is intended to what? Manipulate you. Annoying habits, behaviors repeated by your spouse without much thought or intention that bothers you, including personal mannerisms, some things you just need to clean up and get rid of. And the last one, independent behavior. Behavior conceived, watch this, and executed by your spouse without consideration of your feelings. These often involve one's personal interest and the scheduling of activities. Can I be transparent with you? You know what one of mine is with Wanda that just she gets outdone with? I will plan a marriage event. Mac called me up like, hey, how does November 10th or 11th, 12th work for you? I'm like, looking at hey, Mac, that looks good. All right, book it. All right. And then I go home, and Wanda got a marriage seminar in Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, you didn't talk to me about it. I'm like, do I have to? She said, well, what's the date? November 11th, 12th. There may be something on our calendar, and it's true. Like, she keeps our social calendar much more than I do. The grandchildren and children and family event. Guess what? She keeps that much more than I do. And there could be something she knows about that I don't know about, right? And so we have had any number of times when I'm like, book it, and then I go home saying, hey, I'm doing that. And it's like, we've got this family event. So that's one of mine. I do it. And I'm trying to learn that, hey, Mac, I got to check with my wife. And doesn't that sound kind of like, oh, okay, she's in control. I got to check with Wanda, get her permission to book a marriage. You get the picture? We do it too. Yeah, so I'm trying to get better at that one. All right, the resolution. Hey, expect problems and misunderstandings. Expect that you'll need a lot of patience. Expect a lot of trial and error. Okay? Hey, we're all growing in this. I'm saying, hey, can we do it better? Instead of reacting to each other so much, can we start talking more, discussing more? Can we start responding more, not reacting more? All right. Now, I've got, 12 minutes to do session 6, all right? So I'm going to read some things to you kind of rapidly, and then they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I will try to paint a picture of what I believe Smalley is saying. In the DNA of relationships, Smalley approaches conflict in a different way than much of my training. And when I read it, I kind of had an aha moment. I'm like, hey, I wish I'd known that 40 years ago. And so I do encourage you having a conversation maybe in some of your classes where you talk about the dance that destroys relationships. And I'm going to try to show you the dance that Wanda and I have that makes a withdrawal from the love bank. Now, this looks a little intimidating to you, doesn't it? It does to me. It looks a bit academic, but I want to use it to illustrate just how complicated communication can be. Because on the surface, this looks simple. Here's what it is. This is what they would teach you in, my training was in my marriage and family therapy program. When you're working with a couple and you're doing speaker-listener skills, this is speaker skills. This is what, when you have an issue, these are the things you need to talk about. These are the things you need to be aware of. And what they train us to do is help a couple talk through these things. Facts, data, that would be like facts. Data, thoughts, feelings, wants, actions. That's not complicated, is it? Data, thoughts, feelings, wants, actions. On the surface, that doesn't sound complicated at all. Here's how it goes with Wanda and I sometimes. Okay, let's talk about data. Oh, by the way, in clinical training, you do speaker-listener. So I give this couple an egg, the guy an egg and say, he gets to do the speaker, you get to listen. And then when he's done, right, we take the egg and give it to her and say, she gets to be the speaker and you get to, you got it. See, it's simple, right? You speak, you listen, right? It's not that hard. But let me show you how it gets complicated pretty quickly. Wanda and I go to discuss, hey, I'm going to use what I learned from Mac this weekend. I'm going to go home and teach that, have that conversation with Wanda. And it will go something like this. All right, hey, Wanda, I'm tired of getting to church late. I'd like to start being on time. And she'll say, and I may say it like, I'm tired of always being late for church. And she'll say something like, we're not always late. Well, it's a lot. It's a lot. Well, it's not that often. I'm like, well, it's at least 50%. And no, it's not 50%. We're not that late that often. And so I expect that we will start being on time to church, right? And so I'm going to leave, my plan of action is I'm going to leave at 9:30 to be there on time. And she says, well, wait a minute, you're expecting to get there on time, but you're also expecting lunch to be ready when you get home, right? So I'm up doing lunch, right, for Sunday lunch. I got people coming to our house for Sunday lunch. You're getting ready for church, and I'm having to attend to the lunch. Do you have conversations that go like that? Do you? Maybe not. Maybe it's just that we need counseling. You know, it's like, what? So here's what I'm saying to you. This is an appropriate speaker model. There are some big issues of life where you need to do each of these pieces. Here's the data. Here's thoughts, feelings, wants, and actions. And guess what? Yours might be different than mine. And what I'm suggesting to you, communication gets complicated because guess what? We can't even agree on the facts. We get bogged down on the facts. We argue over the description. We haven't even got to solutions. We can't even agree here. We're already in trouble, right? You with me? Or how about over here? Guess what? Her expectation, what we did yesterday, is different than my expectation. Her opinion's different than my opinion. Her belief is different than my belief. We're duking it out right here. We haven't even got to solutions. Maybe I'm being too transparent, but this is kind of how it goes. Guess what about feelings? We don't do much with that. We communicate that non-verbally, right? We're not good about saying, well, I feel embarrassed when we walk in late. I believe we're being rude when we walk in late. We're not good at using I statements. I feel embarrassed. And we're not good at attending to emotions. We communicate our emotions non-verbally. Raise our voice, sigh, all kinds of, roll our eyes, whatever. And then guess what? We have different wants for you, me, and us. And we have a different plan of action. And so what looks simple on the surface, data, thoughts, feelings, wants, actions, that's not complicated. Each one of those creates problems. You with me? That's why Smalley says, starting anywhere other than attending to the emotions will get you derailed most of the time. When we begin by attempting to figure out who is to blame or what really happened, we succeed only in fueling power struggles and hurtful agreements. True communication usually I'm going to do this rapidly, does not occur until each person understands the feelings that underlie the spoken words. People generally feel more understood, cared for, and connected when the communication focuses what? On their emotions and feelings rather than merely on their words and thoughts. Isn't that true? And yet we give emotions the least attention. Hey, I probably don't have time for that, so let's do the last part. The goal of effective communication is to understand the emotional message of the speaker. You have to ask, what is this person feeling? The Bible says the purposes of a man's heart are what? Deep waters. But a man of understandings, talking about you men, draws them out. What lies within often lies deep within, requiring careful and sustained effort to draw it out. Guys, yeah, we won't do that. We'll pass, all right? We'll let Elisha do that. Compassion and understanding create a tremendous amount of safety. When a person refuses to judge my motives, instead of tries to understand my feelings, why I did some foolish or hurtful things, that person's compassion encourages me to open up. Our relationship grows, the walls come down, and conflicts cease. Hey, look at this. The external problem is rarely the real problem. In other words, what appears to be the problem is often not the problem. Look at that, below the surface. What we see, what they feel. All right, so I only have like 5 minutes to try to give you a picture of what Smalley is trying to say. And the dance that destroys relationships. So they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm going to try to paint a picture of what 20 PowerPoint slides are trying to say, okay? And I hope you'll have a bigger discussion. But watch this. How many of you remember, who were here yesterday, remember me talking about Wanda and the Steve ordering a Diet Coke at Biology? So, we're going through Biology with the 3 grandchildren. Wanda orders water. The 3 she orders water for them. The guy looks at me. I'm like, I'll have a Diet Coke. She looks at me and says, you're the only one that ordered something to drink. That pushed my button. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. I looked at her and said, yes, I'm 62 years old. I'm gainfully employed, and I'd like a Diet Coke. I told you another story of how we left there and we went back to my son's house, and I was over here doing some work, studying, trying to find some patio furniture. And she asked me what I was doing, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking at some patio furniture. It's on sale. She immediately said, don't buy anything without talking to me first. Guess what? Did I just say she pushed my button? Well, she pushed my button again. Oh, I probably should say I pushed her button. Okay? So she pushed my button again. I told the group yesterday, my daughter took up for me. She says, well, Mom, you know Dad, he's going to research everything, and which I do. I do a good job of researching, finding great deals and all that. And she said, yes, I know your dad. Ooh, those are fighting words. And I said, as I told the group yesterday, yeah, what do you know about me? You know that I'm very frugal. You know I research everything. I find good deals. You know I don't make any major financial decisions without involving you. That's what you know about me. That's kind of how that conversation went. I think I'm probably not the only one. I got 2 minutes. One more story. I can get up early in the morning. I head out early to go to work, and sometimes I motivate myself through food, as you can probably tell. I'm like, hey, I'll get up at 5 and go into the office and have a productive day, but I'm going to stop at McDonald's and get me a breakfast meal right on the way. I'm literally dressed, headed out, and she says from the bed, I bought cereal yesterday. Is she imposing behavior on me? She's imposing behavior on me. Right? Isn't she? We don't like behavior to be imposed on us. I'm like, okay. And what's she saying? I bought cereal. You don't need to go spend $5 on a breakfast because you've got something here, right? Now, I've got a minute. What's her button? First of all, what's her legitimate need? Her legitimate need is financial security. That's legitimate. What Smalley talks about is core fear. For every one of our needs and wants, we fear the opposite. We fear insecurity. If you have a need for success, you fear what? If you have a need for companionship, connection, you fear disconnection, right? For every legitimate need and want, we fear the opposite. So her fear is what? Insecurity. So, but what's below the line? Here it is. When I was a CPA, made good money at one time. When I changed careers, it didn't make any financial sense. I went back, went to college, master's, Ph.D., student loans, all that. And so she had this fear that she would never be able to retire. Once she retired a few years ago, guess what her fear is? Steve will never be able to retire. That's the deeper water. All these little snippets are disclosing her button. Now, it's her button to manage. It's hers to manage. I get that. That's hers to manage. Don't you trust God? God's always taking care of it, right? She can manage her own button, right? What's Steve's button? Control. She's trying to control me. She's pushing my button every time she says I can't get a Diet Coke, right? And what are we doing? We're doing this back and forth. Smalley calls that the dance that destroys relationships. And so what's the solution to that? Really, it's her button to manage, my button to manage my reaction when it gets pushed, right? But I can help her manage her button, and she can help me manage my button. It's my button, it's her button. And watch this. Do you think when I sat down with her and said, Wanda, here's the financial plan, here's what we've been doing, here's what this will accumulate to at this date, and she had a better understanding of finances, do you think she quit bugging me about whether I got a Diet Coke or not? That's what Smalley's talking about, and that's what Scripture's talking about the deeper waters. You've got to look at the emotion underneath it, and until you deal with the emotion, you probably haven't solved the problem. Amen? All right, we got to go. I took 1 extra minute, Mac. Thank you, guys.